Hey everybody, Judge Jared here, and today we're going to do a rules roundup. And since I've never done one of these before, I should probably explain what a rules roundup is. I'm in a bunch of different spaces that where people are asking rules questions, including various group chats or Discord groups, Facebook groups, and all that. I guess, seeing what questions get asked to the official Twitter account as well. And so I see a lot of different questions and field a lot of different questions every day, basically, about the rules. And so I figured it would be useful to cover some of these questions that I'm seeing, because if somebody else is asking it, it's something that you might not know the answer to as well, whether you're a player or somebody who wants to be a judge. So I figure it's worth kind of using these questions that are out there as something to talk about, to have discussions about the rules, not just specific to the question being asked, but broadly. And so we're going to go over some questions here that I've seen. I'm taking these ones today from the unofficial global Discord rules group. So all the questions are coming from there. I've gotten rid of everybody's kind of identifying stuff here because I didn't ask anybody's permission, so I don't want to out anybody who's asking questions. So I've removed the names of the people that asked, but I'm taking the questions there. For anybody who's curious, I took the questions that were asked between the dates of March 20th and March 26th of this year. And we're going to cover what these questions were, what the answers are, and hopefully learn a little bit along the way here. So, first question we have is, can I use dull abilities on my opponent's turn as long as they meet the requirements? I've put up two different examples here. We have Warrior of Light because he's got a dull icon ability, and we've got Kuja, who does have an ability that involves dulling himself, but it doesn't use that icon. So the answer here is that in the case of the dull icon specifically, there's a special rule around that, which is that you can a forward or backup can only use a dull icon ability if it either has haste or if you have continuously controlled it since the beginning of your most recent turn. So if you just cast it this last turn and it doesn't have haste, you can't use that ability. If you just took control of it on you're in the middle of your last turn, and it's your opponent's turn, and you want to use it, then if they don't have haste, you can't use it there. Otherwise, if you have controlled it continuously since the previous turn, or if it has haste like Warrior of Light does, then yeah, absolutely. You can use it during your opponent's turn whenever you have priority and are allowed to use abilities and summons. In the case of Kuja, even though the cost essentially is the same, it's dulling himself for an effect, because it does not use the dull icon. You can use that regardless of haste, regardless of how long you've controlled it. The moment that Kuja's on the field, if you control him, you can dull him to use that ability. And that includes on your opponent's turn. Again, when you have priority, you can do that. I should point out that monsters do not have the same restriction on dull icon abilities. So if you have a monster that is not also a forward, just a monster, you can use that dull icon ability immediately, just like Kuja can with his ability. If the monster is also a forward, it's going to be under the same restrictions that a forward is in terms of when it's allowed to use the dull icon ability. So a whole lot of talking there to answer the question, but that's the answer, is that on your opponent's turn, if there's not something that's stopping you from using it as far as the dull icon rules or something else, then yes, absolutely, you can use dull abilities on your opponent's turn. All right, next question. If I have these two on the board, does that mean all my forwards are safe from summons and abilities? All must choose Auron, but Kimahri prevents this? If you're not familiar with these two cards, Auron's ability says summons and abilities of your opponent must choose Auron if possible. So if you're doing something that chooses and Auron's on the field, you have to choose him. Kimahri, on the other hand, has two field abilities. One that says the job guardian other than Kimahri you control cannot be chosen by your opponent's abilities, and then another ability that says the category 10 characters other than Kimahri you control cannot be chosen by your opponent's summons. So the question being asked here is that because Kimahri makes it so that Auron can't be chosen by summons or abilities, because he's both a guardian and a 10 character, does that make it so that they can't target anything? Because they have to target Auron, but they also can't target Auron. The answer in this scenario is a very important little caveat at the end of Auron's ability. It says, must choose Auron if possible. Those words are absolutely key here. They basically say, if Auron's a legal target, you must choose him. The same thing comes up if, for example, you were casting something that needed to target a forward of cost 5 or more. Well, Auron doesn't cost 5 or more, so you can't target him, but that doesn't mean you can't target something else. So yeah, if you have Auron and Kimahri, it's a cute idea to think that this combo makes it so you've now kind of protected everything, but the if possible on Auron makes it so that now they can just choose whatever they want, basically. All right, next question here. Can I use this ability more than once each turn to clear out boards? It's not clear from the question here which ability we're talking about. Yuna does have 2 different action abilities, but the answer is going to be the same for both of them, which is that because neither of these abilities say that they have a restriction on how often you can use them in a turn, then yes, you absolutely can use them more than once each turn. The caveat there is that you have to be able to pay the cost every time that you want to activate it. So for the first ability, removing 4 cards in your break zone from the game, yes, you can use that repeatedly as long as you each time have 4 cards in your break zone that you can pay the cost by removing them from the game. With her second ability, the dull one, you can absolutely use that multiple times in a turn. But however, since the cost is dulling her, you would have to have a way of reactivating her in between each time there in order to be able to pay that cost again of dulling her. But yeah, if you can get enough activations off of this to clear out boards, more power to you. It's going to be probably difficult to clear out bigger forwards unless they're playing a whole lot of Vikings or something. You're probably not going to clear a board, but however many times you can pay for it, go for it. Knock yourself out. Okay, next question. Hi all, quick query utilizing one of the new cards from the set that has a situational effect on play. Just wanted to know which effect, dull or the break, would take place on an X-Burst trigger and if the amount of cadets does or doesn't matter for resolving the effect. Sorry if it's been answered before, just wanted to query the syntax. So this Jack, his ability here, the one that has the X-Burst on it, says, when Jack enters the field, choose one forward opponent controls. Dull it. If you control 5 or more job class 0 cadet, break it instead. So the question here is, when it's an X-Burst, what's going to happen? Is it going to just dull the forward? Does it, if you meet the requirement of 5 cadets, is it going to break it as well? What happens here? And so for X-Bursts, when they do get activated, in the case of abilities, you're going to use the entire effect. Whatever the paragraph is there that is the ability that has the X-Burst on it, you're going to do all that. If it was a summon that has an X-Burst, you do the entire card, basically. Because the entire card is one effect, other than if it has like an alternate way of casting it or affecting the casting cost. So in the case of Jack, if Jack gets flipped over as an X-Burst, you're going to do the entire effect, which means that you'll choose a forward, and you'll, depending on how many cadets you have, you're either going to dull it or break it. So the amount of cadets absolutely does matter on an X-Burst here, just because the effect is treated the same way, whether it's triggered as an X-Burst or whether it is from Jack entering the field. All right. Hey all, wanted to understand if then text, like in Tseng and Glenn, alter how auto ability canceling effects apply to them versus a card like Warrior of Light that just does 2 things in the one auto ability. I know that the then text means that Tseng does not have to reveal a job member of the Turks to resolve the other half of the ability, and Glenn does not have to search 2-cost soldiers and could just play viable targets already in hand. But is a then ability still considered one whole auto ability as opposed to a when you do so ability that is a 2-part ability, and cards like Amaterasu would negate the entire thing? Very wordy question here. I'm going to try to narrow it down to the core of what the question is. So I'm using Tseng here, but Glenn works the same way. As brought up, but just to kind of again narrow it down, we're going to talk about Tseng's ability because he's been around longer. People are more familiar with him. So his ability, when he enters the field, reveal the top 5 cards of your deck, add 1 job member of the Turks among them to your hand, return to the rest of the bottom, and then you may play 1 job member of the Turks from your hand onto the field. So the question here is that his ability, the effect there, does have it's got a break, it's got the end of a sentence, and then it says, then you may play 1 job member of the Turks from your hand onto the field. And as the question points out, the part of it that says then you may play 1 of the field is not predicated on having actually successfully done the first half. If you revealed 5 cards and there was no member of the Turks, you still got the then part of it. So that if you already had 1 in your hand, yeah, you can play it. And then Glenn works the same way with soldiers. So the question here is whether it's all one auto ability. In the same way that Warrior of Light has the activate your backups and then draw one card. So is this all one auto ability, and would Amaterasu negate the entire thing? And the answer to that is yes, it is all one auto ability. It's all one paragraph, so it's all one effect, one auto ability in this case. So if you Amaterasu that when Tseng enters, it is going to hit the whole thing. It's going to hit the, looking at the top 5, and it's going to hit the then part there. Part of the question here comes from that there are some auto abilities that say when you do so, and those ones create a second auto ability that goes on the stack and has its own kind of resolution and whole kind of life cycle there that an auto ability does. And so even in those cases where it's, as they describe it, a 2-part ability, but it's, I'm going to say a when you do so ability, if you Amaterasu the original one that went on the stack, it is canceling the entire thing. So that means the when you do so is not going to happen either. So in either scenario, you're canceling the whole thing. So even though it says then here, it's all one effect. Okay, so that'll all get canceled by Amaterasu. Next question we have here is, me and a friend were playing. I activated a card to break access, and he activated the put in break zone to the stack. Can he activate it in response? I'm going to kind of translate the question here. So the player is saying that they put an effect on the stack that was going to break access, and while it's on the stack, the controller of access says, okay, I'm going to use his action ability. It says put access into the break zone, choose one forward other than card name access, and add it to your hand. So the person here's asking a question like, is that allowed? Like, he got targeted by something that's going to break him. Is he allowed to respond by using this action ability to break himself? And just like the question earlier with dull abilities, the answer here is yes. There's nothing in the ability that says it's restricted to your turn, and the only cost to activate it is putting him into the break zone. So it doesn't really matter whether he's targeted by anything, whether he's about to break. If the effect's on the stack, all that matters is that it's on the stack. It hasn't done its thing yet. So it's absolutely a legal play for the access controller to go, okay, cool, I'm just going to break him and use the ability and get the benefit from that since he's going to break anyway. Yeah, so hopefully that answers that. Next one here, we have one of the new cards. Kraken 3 from Opus 25 says, if the opponent uses Kraken to remove one of my backups and I play the same backup in its place, what happens when Kraken leaves the field? Does the backup that was removed from game go to the break zone, or do both the one that was removed and the one I played after get broken? Again, a pretty wordy question. So we're going to go into what Kraken's ability is for a second here first. The auto ability says, when Kraken enters the field, choose one backup opponent controls, remove it from the game for as long as Kraken is on the field. Now, this isn't the first time we've had this type of effect. The most commonly known one is Larcacus, the 1 CP fire backup, but we also had Dorgan before that, the wind forward, for those of you who are FFTCG boomers like myself. So the way this effect works is that you choose the backup, it gets removed from play, and then when Kraken leaves the field for any reason, that backup's going to come back immediately. This is not something that uses the stack. It's not something that waits for priority. The moment that Kraken leaves the field, that backup comes back into play. So the question here is, what if Kraken removed something that was not a multi-play backup, and the player after that point had played another copy of it? So now Kraken leaves, the backup's supposed to come back. What happens in this scenario? Because it's illegal to have both on there. Let's say it was a Lena, for example. So Kraken removed Lena, opponent played another Lena, Kraken leaves, now it wants to play another Lena to the field. How do we resolve this? And what's going to happen here is that whenever there's an effect that would cause a character to get played to the field that is illegal, either because of light and dark rules or because of a name clash situation like the Lenas that I mentioned, at the moment it's going to resolve, it's just going to fail to resolve. It's going to fail to play it to the field. It might be a little confusing, this scenario, because the card itself, Kraken, doesn't say you're playing it to the field, but Square has actually answered this question, or Hobby Japan rather, has answered this question by saying that even though the card doesn't use the word play on it, that it is considered to be playing it to the field. So it's treated the same way as if it had said play it to the field. So yeah, the effect is not going to play it because it's going to see that it's illegal for that card to enter the field, and it's just going to stay removed. So the resolution is that it goes, oh, well, it can't be played to the field. It's just going to stay removed, and then nothing else happens. So we don't have to worry about it entering and then having both of them break or anything like that. So yeah, that's how we resolve Kraken if it wants to bring back something that was already removed. I forget if they asked if there's 5 backups as well. They didn't ask that question, but I'll bring it up here. If you had 5 backups already and there wasn't a name clash situation, it'd be the same thing. It wouldn't bring in that 6th one because it sees that it's illegal to play a 6th backup on there. Okay, Teodor question here. Does this Teodor discard 3 of my cards when it comes in from Warp? And also, is Warp the same as Suspend from Magic the Gathering? Teodor here has 2 auto abilities at the bottom here. You got the when Teodor enters the field, your opponent discards 2 cards, and when Teodor enters the field due to Warp, your opponent discards 1 card. So they're asking, do both those things happen when he comes in from Warp, or is it just like one or the other? These are separate auto abilities. You can see they're on separate lines. It can be a little hard to tell in this scenario because the first one, about discarding 2 cards, it goes almost all the way to the end of the line. So it can seem like, oh, is this one effect? And it's just altered depending on if you warped or not. But from context and the fact that the last line there says when Teodor enters the field, and it's not like a when you do so, or if Teodor enters the warp, your opponent discards 1 card instead. It doesn't say something like that. There's nothing that connects the 2 of them. So they're 2 separate auto abilities. So to answer the question, yes, if it warps in, then you're going to have both auto abilities trigger, and the Teodor controller can put them on the stack in whatever order they want. They can put the discard 2 first, and then the discard 1 above it, or the other way around. That's fine. As for the other question, is Warp the same as Suspend from Magic the Gathering? I'm not really qualified to answer that question. I haven't played Magic the Gathering since Visions in 1997, so I could not tell you anything about the comparison between Warp and Suspend. But if you're watching this video, you're not watching for my Magic rules knowledge, so somebody else can answer that one there for you. All right, very wordy one here about Charlotte. Just had this situation happen and we're unsure how to resolve it. I control Charlotte and have 3 damage, so she has 7k power. Opponent used Waka's special and picked Charlotte as the target. Now comes the confusion. My opponent controls Titus and plays Gipple. Can they pick a different forward than Charlotte for Gipple's Dull and Freeze since Titus can break Charlotte? Or must it still pick Charlotte as she is still in the field when the ability is put into the stack? That might be a lot for you to absorb right now of what the question is being asked. So I'm going to, again, kind of distill this down to what is the core question being asked here. The core question being asked in this scenario, we're going to kind of ignore the specifics in terms of like Titus and Gipple and Waka and what all their abilities do and the fact that they're at 3 damage. It all boils down to this. There are 2 effects that are going onto the stack at the same time, one of which would break Charlotte, and the other one doesn't. And what they're asking in this scenario is the one that's not going to break Charlotte, does it still have to choose Charlotte because she's about to break anyway? So they're asking, like, do I still have to pick her because she's about to break anyway? And the answer there is absolutely yes, you still have to pick Charlotte, because both these effects, if they are choosing, which I believe they are, I'm not using the specific cards here, but both Gipple and Titus's are not select effects. They both use the word choose. So both of those use the word choose. They're both going on the stack at the same time, and when you put an effect on the stack that uses the word choose, you have to select the target at that point in time. You have to choose the target at that moment in time, which means that at the time that you're choosing both effects, Charlotte's on the field. Her field ability is still in effect, and so you're still bound by that restriction. So in the specific scenario that they've given with Titus and Gipple and everything, yes, Titus would choose Charlotte. Gipple's ability also still has to choose Charlotte to dull and freeze her. The game doesn't know and doesn't really care whether or not Charlotte's going to break afterward. It just knows what's happening right now in the moment, and right now in the moment, you are forced to choose her. All right, we have our final question for today about Ardyn. It says, if I use Ardyn's effect and they don't have forwards, can they still choose that option? This Ardyn, so it's unique effect in terms of that it's an auto ability but has your opponent select actions. I think Babis is the only one I can think of off the top of my head that's a similar way, where it's your effect but your opponent selects. So they're basically asking if you're selecting from multiple actions, and for one of those actions, you don't have the whatever the thing is that needs to be chosen. Can they choose that option? I am going to point out with Ardyn's effect specifically, so we're talking about the first one here. It says your opponent selects one character they control, put it into the break zone. So a couple quick things to correct. First is that Ardyn's effect there doesn't choose, it selects a character, and there are different rules around when something chooses versus selects. It's not relevant here, but just it's always important to get that distinction. So it selects one character and puts it into the break zone. And I had something else I was going to correct, and I forgot what it was. But so maybe I'll come back to it. Oh, forwards. So it says if they don't have forwards. Now, the thing about Ardyn's effect is that it says to select one character. It's not forwards, it's characters. So if they didn't have any forwards, but they had backups or monsters, then they're still that anyway. But I'm going to answer the question the way that we should be thinking about it, which is if they don't have any characters, can they still select that option that selects characters? The answer here is yes. You are allowed to, when an auto ability, specifically when an auto ability has multiple actions to select from, you are allowed to select an action to which you do not have whatever character needs to be chosen, or in this case, there's no choosing. So whatever the action is, even if you can't carry it out, you can still select that action. This came up really prominently with the Lightning Water Onion Knight that either chooses something to return to hand or it chooses a damaged forward. In that case, they have said that you can choose the option that says to choose one damaged forward opponent controls, even if your opponent doesn't control a damaged forward. So with auto abilities, you can do that. With summons or action abilities, or basically anything else that has multiple actions to it, you can't do that, because you're activating it on purpose, basically. But with an auto ability that triggers just whenever the trigger happens, you don't have total control over it. You can select an action even if you can't carry it out, whether it's choosing or just the thing doesn't happen. So if they have no characters on the field, they can just select that, sure, I'll select a character and put it into the break zone as many times as they want there, even though there's nothing for them to put in. All right, that was the final question for today's rules roundup. So I hope that you kind of enjoyed that, learned something from it. If you have any feedback about it, please let me know. I hope this is something that is useful to people. So if you want me to go into more detail about certain things, let me know. If you want me to go into less detail about things, let me know. If it wasn't clear, some of the answers I gave, you can bring that up too. If I messed up a ruling, bring it up, and I'll make sure that I do what I can to kind of correct that. Or if you have any follow-up questions, like, wait, what about this? Yeah, ask that too. If there's any particular questions or topics or anything you'd like to see me talk about in the future, please ask as well. You can reach out to me on Facebook, or you can comment on this video. If you know me personally, you can just reach out to me however on Discord or Facebook or texting. I don't think any of my FF friends text me. But yeah, feel free to reach out to me. And I'm just going to keep on trying to do these things to have discussions about various rules interactions that come up, because it might be things that you never even thought about before, and go, oh, okay, that's good to know. So yeah, that's going to do it for today. This is the part I'm supposed to say like and subscribe. So yeah, like and subscribe if you want to watch more rules content stuff from me. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. I'm Judge Jared, and until next time, court is adjourned.